Hello, thank you for joining today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Matthew. Today we're in chapter 6. We're looking at verses 19 through 34. Now, that's the end of chapter 6. So we're going through the second half of chapter 6. I just want to remind us of what we've been talking about these past few times. We are in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount started back in chapter 5. It goes from chapter 5 to chapter 7. And so as we read through the book of Matthew, it's important for us to remember that we're here in the middle. We've already read an introduction, but we are now in the body. And as we go through the body, we'll go through the rest of this chapter and the beginning of chapter 7 before we reach the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount. So I wanted you to remember that. Remember, the Sermon on the Mount is not about the things that we can do to be better Christians. It's about the things that we do because we're Christians. In other words, every Christian is expected to look like this. It's not, we can pick some of these things and say, oh, I'm doing a good job being a Christian, while we're not doing others. In terms of Jesus' mindset, we are to do all of these things. And if we're not doing all of these things, we're falling short of Jesus' call for Christianity. So as Christians, we are to do all of these things that we've heard about and all those things we're going to hear about in this Sermon on the Mount. It's not a pick and choose. It's an all or nothing. So as we get to that, we get to chapter 6, and we're here in the middle. And in this section here, at the end of chapter 6, we're going to see that Jesus is going to teach us about materialism. In fact, if I was going to put a title on this, I might say something like, True Treasure Comes from Seeking First God's Kingdom. Something like that. And we'll see here as we go through it that Jesus is going to give us a choice. He's going to say, you can be heavenly minded or you can be earthly minded. And so that's going to be what he's going to show us, and he's going to show it to us in 4 different illustrations. So the first illustration he gives us is about treasure. He says, where are you going to store your treasure? You're going to store it on earth or you're going to store it in heaven? That's our choice. The second illustration he's going to give us is, well, how's your eye? Are you covetous or are you content? That's the second one. The third one is he's going to ask us who we're going to serve. You're going to serve God? You're going to serve money, wealth, property. So again, Jesus gives us a choice. Finally, as he wraps it up, he gives us a longer illustration. And basically he asks us, are you going to worry about the things that you need and want, or are you going to worry about God's kingdom? Which one are you going to worry about? So basically, that's what Jesus is going to talk about as we go through this. Now, let's look at each one of those quickly. We can't go into super depth in them, but let's look at each one of those quickly so we can have an understanding of what Jesus is trying to say. So when we look at the first one, he's talking about where we're going to store our treasure. We can work for all the things here, but there's an old saying, you can't take it with you. On the other hand, we can do what God's calling us to do. It's going to be painful, it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's not going to give us fame and wealth. But it's going to store up treasures in heaven. And Jesus' point is, treasures in heaven, that's eternal. Treasures on earth, that's short term. So what are you going to do? You know, look at the eternal stuff, you're going to look at the short term stuff. So that's the first illustration. The second illustration is about the eye. And Jesus says, are your eyes coveting materialism, things of the world, your neighbor's stuff? Are you covetous? Jesus says, if you are, then you're dark. But he says, otherwise, if you're not like that, you're content and your eyes are light. So here, Jesus gives us this option. Do we want to be in darkness or do we want to be in light? Covetousness puts us in darkness. It wrecks our heart. But contentment puts us in light. We no longer have or need or feel a need for things that we really don't need or want. So it changes our hearts. So this is important. The third one is who we're going to serve. Are we going to serve our wealth, our money, our property, or are we going to serve God? And that one's, you know, I mean, obviously every one of us are saying, well, I serve God. But Jesus doesn't say serve God. He says serve God or wealth. He's giving us a choice. And I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee you that most of the people watching this are going to say, well, I work 40 hours a week to build up my wealth. Well, how much time do you give to God? I bet you it's not 40 hours a week. So, right, we need to be careful with that. Now, today we live in this time where we talk about quality time versus quantity time, and we are okay with that. And, if we want to go down that path, that's okay. But are you giving that quality time to God? Don't think that if you sit in the church for an hour on Sunday that you've done that work, right? God's expecting a lot more than just an hour a week. There's 173 hours in a week, 172, one of those. And how many hours are we giving to God? So who are we serving? God or the things of the world? And finally, he ends with this idea of, are we going to be worried about our clothes, our food, our shelter, the things that we think we need? Or are we going to worry about what God needs, what God wants? And his point in this is very interesting because he gives us a promise. He tells us, if we choose properly who to serve, if we choose properly not to covet, if we choose properly where to store up our treasure, if we choose properly what to worry about, then you know what? All these other things are going to be given unto us. So we can actually have both if we put our priority in the right place. And that's the point of this whole section. How are you going to deal with your materialism? True treasure comes from seeking first God's kingdom. Then you get all the other treasure also. So that's what Jesus wants us to know. If you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, go ahead and put them in the comment section below. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you.